Okay. So
Shoot.
ignore the camera and you just look at me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't look
All
there.
right.
Just forget all this stuff's here, and
Okay.
I'm just gonna ask you some stuff,
Thank
and
you.
we'll just play with it. We'll just
Okay.
you tell me some fun stories.
Okay.
And anyway, so uh, tell me your first remembrance of Lowell. What he was about? How old? How much older? About 13, 14 years older than you.
Around there.
Okay.
And I wanted to drive, or yes, I wanted to learn how to drive.
Yeah.
And he says, I'll teach you how to drive. And so I says, well, let's do it. And we got an old tractor.
Yeah.
And I went down there, and he showed me a few of the how to drive this tractor. We drove it around the field.
You remember what kind of tractor it was?
Dad had mostly cock shut tractors
Mm-hmm.
and international. So I think it was an international tractor, an old one, old one. And then I wanted to drive a truck.
So how old would you have been when he wanted to teach you how to drive a tractor?
I must have been 10,
Yeah.
somewhere around 10 or 12, somewhere in there. And when I wanted to drive a truck, Dad had an old 52 Ford truck. And Lowell says the only thing you got to remember is the clutch. It's very hard to drive a truck if you've got to use the clutch and the gears. And I just about put it through his house when I drove it. And his bedroom was on one end. And that's the end I just about went through his house. And he was getting a little uptight. And he says, I think I better quit teaching you how to drive. And he kept working with me about it, and then I learned how to drive a standard truck. And if it wasn't for Lowell, I wouldn't have learned a lot of things. He taught me how to tie my tie, and I had a hard time learning how to tie a tie. I'd always get it loose. I'd lose one lip or one thing on it, and I couldn't get it, and he'd practice with me. But he had the patience of just a wonderful brother. He was good. He tried many things in life, and some things he made it, some things he didn't. But he would always the type of guy that wanted stuff for his family. Always he'd do the thing that I remembered the most about him. He would do 2 or 3 jobs just to have shoes for his kids or have things for his kids, and he wouldn't give up. He would get into arena wear, which pots and pans, and if he couldn't make it there, he'd try something else. He was always trying different things, and he'd always loved music. He'd go to the dump and find an old guitar, bring it home, fix it up. He was always working with the family. He had more time to share with the kids than anybody I have ever known. To this be around him was interesting. But I got along with, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I got along better with Lowell than I ever did his wife. His wife was over here, and we were over here. But Lowell always trusted in me and always helped me out. He always liked hunting. He liked fishing. He liked to mingle with a lot of people. He was always wanting to know what they did, what they were interested in, how they did it. And mainly he was interested in the family. And he'd work at many things to try to make ends meet. One time, if I can mention it, I had a habit for
Let's hold that thought for a second. That's fine. Just if you need to get it out, and remember what you were just going to tell me, because I think this is going to be a great story.
Okay.
Just going to adjust that a little bit. See how we're doing here.
fence?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
home?
Yeah, that's fine. So, just gonna pause. Remember what it was?
I had a habit when I was growing up of buying new trucks. And I wouldn't buy them, I would lease them. And I'd go into town and lease another truck, and then I'd drive it for a while. And about, 3 months or 4 months, I'd go in and get another one. Or if I wanted to try out a car, I'd go in and get another car. But this time I went in and got a half-ton truck, and it was a white one. And Lowell came up to me and he says, I have to go to Edmonton. And he says, I don't think my car is going to make it. And I says, no problem. You can take my truck. And he says, yeah, but it's brand new. I says, it don't matter. I says, just take the truck. And Ron was telling me this last night. He said that he went with him to Edmonton, and he says they passed a couple of way stations, and he says, Dad, it says on this way station all trucks supposed to pull in, and he was worried that the policeman would be behind him, and he says, we made it to Edmonton and back in your new truck. And Ron says, I could always remember that because you gave Dad that truck to go to Edmonton in. And Lowell often wanted to know why I would just pass a new truck over to him. And it was a lot for the way Lowell treated me. He treated me with respect. He treated me with honor that I had a hard time getting from other people. And he was one of the favorite brothers.
That's neat. Thanks for telling me that story. That's fun to hear. A
Yeah,
lot of this
well,
stuff is brand new to me, so it's a lot of fun.
but
Let me see, what else is there? Is there anything else you wanted to keep going with there? Or?
well, Lowell was always interested in fishing, hunting, boat riding. He was interested in sports. He was interested in making sure his family was into music and to learning different things in the world. He didn't want them to stay home and be farmers. He wanted them to get out in the world and see what there was. And I think that's very important for a lot of young people growing up nowadays. They kind of want to stay around home and be where they're safe and stuff. That was a lot of my problem. I wanted to stay home and be safe. And I never got out and into the world. And he wanted to make sure his kids got out and seen the world. And I can honestly say it really did a lot of good.
I think that probably had a lot with him going on his mission to New Zealand and going to
It
this
did.
exotic place. Do you remember when he came home from his mission?
No, I don't. I know Ardell came into the kitchen, and I hid behind the table. I didn't know who he was.
Really?
And Mother came in, and she says, Ardell's home. And I says, yeah, but there's somebody in our kitchen, and you got to get him out. And Mom says, that's your brother. And I just didn't know. Didn't have a clue it was Ardell. So
How much older than you is Ardell?
I think he's about 5 years, isn't he, dear?
5 years?
I think he's about that old.
Yeah, something like that.
I think he's
So
around
he's
there.
in between you and Lowell then?
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I
Donna.
knew, I couldn't remember where exactly. But, and Donna, where's Donna in relation to you? Is she just...
Donna
Is
is,
she like 2 or 3 years older?
no, Donna's 10
Oh,
years.
She's older than Ardell.
Yeah, Donna's
Okay.
10 years older than I am.
Is she? Okay.
Yeah,
So it's Lowell, Donna, Ardell, and then you.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
For some reason I had that mixed up.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah.
So Ardell came home and you had no idea who this
I
stranger was
I
in the
had
kitchen.
I had no idea who it was.
That's funny.
I was a little scared. I was wondering how they're gonna get him out of there because I didn't really know that he was around.
Yeah.
And another thing, when Ardell was out on his mission, Ardell came home and says to Dad, "You've really had some good luck in how I was on my mission and stuff. You really had a lot of blessings." And I can remember Dad turning to him and saying, "We had 2 years of hail, just wiped us out." And Ardell says, "How did you ever keep me out on a mission?" And Dad says, "It took a lot of faith and a lot of prayers." And those 2 years that I worked with Dad, that Ardell was out there, we had a tough time. And we had a tough time all through our lives until we got up into our teens, and then we started making money. But
Tell me something about your dad, because I was probably 9 years old, I think, when he died, and so I have very few memories of your dad. The only memories I have are when they lived in Cardston, and we used to go over on Sunday afternoons, and we'd say we're going to go visit Grandma and Grandpa Hartley,
yeah,
and we'd go to their house, and the things I always remember is we'd come in, and Grandma and Grandpa were there, and he'd always say, "Come here, kiddies." He'd always call us kiddies. He'd say,
Yeah.
"Come here, kiddies, come give me a smack." That was his thing. And he always seems like he always had about 2 or 3 days of stubble beard, and we'd go and kiss him. And I just remember that sharp beard. And it was just
Yeah.
a distinct memory for me. He was such a kind man, but I didn't get to know him that much. Tell me some impressions that you have about your dad and what he was like.
well, mostly he was a hard worker. He was always doing things for other people. Mother was a nurse. She was always doing things for other people. And many times I remember Mother lying on the sofa, just sicker and the dickens. She was sick. And somebody'd phone her up and say, "Could you come and I have been sick for a couple of days. Could you come down and see me or bring some medicine or stuff?" Mother would always get up off the couch and go down and help these people. And Dad was the same way. Dad would, if somebody needed a tractor, Dad would always make sure the tractor was available for him. Somebody needed a truck, he'd always make sure the truck was running and ready to go for him. And this didn't sit well with Lowell and I and Ardell sometimes. I don't know who it was. It might have been Lowell. It might have been Ardell. I can't really remember. I think it was Lowell that we had agreed that Dad was going to the temple one day, and Dad says the truck goes to a certain person, tractor goes to somebody else. So Lowell and I went and hid the tractor, and we hid the truck. And Dad took off and went to the temple, and we knew we were going to get the gears for it, but these guys came to get their tractor and get their truck, and we don't know what happened to it. We can't find it. It's disappeared. And we had to hay the next day. The tractor was ready to go. Dad would come home and say, "Well, what do we need to do to fix up this tractor to get it running?" Because this guy would put into the water, he'd put gasoline into the gasoline tank, he'd put water, he'd wreck our tractors, and he'd run over nails, he'd run over pieces of sharp iron, he'd bust our tires up. And this other guy would always go for gravel or something like that, but he'd always bring back another load of gravel for us. He was always took care of our vehicles, and Dad would say, "You can always know who you can trust and who you can't." And he says, if you listen to your conscience, you'd always know who you could believe in and who you couldn't. And this guy, he came and I says, either you handle him or I will. And this guy says, I want that tractor. I need that tractor. And I says, if you need that tractor so much, you go out and buy one. We had to. You go out and buy one. And that made him mad. And I says, we don't want you coming around for dinner anymore because you're bumming off us and we're tired of it. And when Mom and Dad come back from the temple that night, we knew we were in trouble because Dad would know. Dad didn't say anything. And that's how I knew the kind of guy Dad was, is because he let us make the mistakes, but he would still trust us enough to go ahead and do it. And we went and hayed the next day and put up our hay. And Dad would say, boy, the tractor sure runs good today. I wonder, what did you guys do? Did you guys fix the tires or keep it in good shape? What did you do? You know, he knew this guy that would borrow it would come back and we'd be tied up for 2 or 3 days. And I always knew that Dad knew, but he never said boo to us. And he was some great guy.
Yeah, I remember stories about Grandma and Grandpa being so generous and always giving, and
always giving.
People had hard times, and they would always go out of their way to give, and even when it was hard for them.
Yeah.
I heard stories about your mother always making an extra room at the table for somebody.
For guests and everybody. She'd help everybody out. And Mom used to say I was so sick that I couldn't hardly go and help anybody, but she'd always help. And another time, Mother used to go to the temple or go shopping with somebody else and had to walk down 2 miles to where she could get a ride in. And I'd start Dad's tractor and go pick her up and take her down. And I'd say, Mom, if you give me some sort of time that I can come and pick you up, I'll be here to bring you home. And she'd always give me some sort of time. And Dad would say, oh, you could have let her walk, you know, we could have done other things. And I says, no, that's my mother, and I'm gonna do things for her. And I tried to be good, but sometimes I got a little bad too. Had a few problems. So, shoot. Go ahead.
Let's pause let's see if we're going here.
I better, might be dirty.
Oh, that's fine. Let's see, I'm just gonna tweak this just. Okay.
Hopefully the microphone won't work.
All right. Okay. Maybe a way to lead into the. Just a second. Let me see where we're at here. Okay. Okay. You're gonna tell me a bear story.
Bear story?
Yeah.
Okay, we were coming home from somewhere and we seen a black, looked like a black calf or something coming up the road. We didn't know quite what it was. And we went down, Ardell and I went down and looked at it, and it was a bear. It was a cub coming up the road. And Ardell says, we'll go home and get the gun and drop him. And so we went home and asked Dad, and Dad says, no, let him do whatever. He'll wander off. And Ardell says, no, but he'll kill a few calves and stuff. And Dad says, no, he'll be okay. So we watched this bear walk up the road, and he just sauntered up the road. And it was a little cub bear.
Wow.
And we, over the period of living there, we've seen so many different animals come through the Hartleyville where It was out in the open. You never think that anything would, come up the road like that, like this cougar. When I came home from with, you want me to tell this?
Yeah.
When I came home with my half ton, I parked by the garage. I pulled up and parked like I usually do, and I could hear this kind of a whine, like cats do. And I looked up in the tree. I was shocked. I couldn't even get in my truck to go anywhere. And so I just took off on a dead run over to Lowell's. And I went, knocked on the door, and he opened the door, and I said, "Oh, you gotta come quick." I was darn near out of breath. And he says, "Why?" And I says, "There's a cat up in the tree." And he says, "A kitty cat? Little cat? Big cat? What?" I says, "No, it's a cougar up in the tree." And Lorraine says, "Oh, yeah, right, sure. Yeah, I believe, yeah, there's a, sure." And she snuffed it off. Well, I had to beg Lowell and beg him, and Lowell says, finally, he says, "Well, to prove everybody right, I'm going to go over there with you and see if it is a cat or not." Well, Lorraine says, "You're stupid to go with him because you're just not going to get it out of him." So Lowell grabbed his gun and shells. We jumped in his car and came over, and Lowell says, he jumped out of the car and he says, "Where is it?" I says, right above my truck roof, just right up above the shed there." And he says, "It's a cougar." He says, "I'll get my shells and drop him." And so he got his shells, loaded the gun, and dropped him. And he just was a few inches off of my truck. And Lowell says, "Man, I'm sure glad you come and got me." And I says, "Well, I didn't want this cougar around." And he says, I just can't believe that he didn't, jump at you or attack you or something, because he had his mouth open. And so when we went back, I asked Lowell to make sure the cat was dead because I didn't want to have him crawl away. We went back, and Lorraine says, "Well, see, Lowell, I told you, you can't believe a darn thing he says." Lowell says, "Well, sorry, this time you can." "What? You sure?" And Lowell says, "Yeah, I just dropped a cougar." "Well, I gotta go see for myself." Well, I don't know if Lorraine ever went over, but Lowell says, "I'm gonna skin this cat and put it in my house." And so he phoned the Hutterites, and the Hutterite says, "Yeah, I'll skin him for you." But Lowell says, "I want him just the way he is, with his mouth open and the tail and everything." So there was many moments in my life that I was glad that I had a brother that would doubt me in ways but believe me in another way. I'm sorry for his wife, but that's the way it goes.
Okay, tell me about.
I'm gonna get head going home, I know.
Tell me about.
You want to know the truth? I tell you the truth.
Tell
Okay.
me about Lowell's guns.
It
seemed like he had a passion for guns and collecting guns
He-
since he was little. Tell me
he
about
had-
your.
He had many guns. He had little guns. He had big guns. He had rifles. He had a whole selection of guns. He just loved his guns and loved his shells. He had pistols and he had rifles. I bought a rifle from somebody once, and it was an automatic rifle. And I didn't hardly get it home, but he wanted to buy it. And I said, "No, you're not going to get this one." And I kept it for quite a few years. So all the things about Lorraine,
All right. So tell me about this gun. Start again and tell me about this gun story of yours.
okay, the guns Lowell collected. He liked pistols. He liked all kinds of guns. He liked shotguns, rifles, any kind of gun he could find, he liked. And he just, a lot of people would call him gun crazy. And he just loved guns. And he had a couple of holsters that I wanted at one time. And I wanted to put on my belt to carry my gun in, because I had BB guns, and I had a little 22 pistol that I used to carry all the time when I could get away with it. Dad used to say, one of these times you're going to be carrying that in the wrong place, and they're going to not like you too much. But Lowell was always into things like this. He never had a boat until later on in life, and then him and Ardell bought a boat together. And he just loved a lot of sports. Wanted to make sure his family was a lot like he was. And I'm surprised you're not. I'm surprised you don't have a lot of guns around. I asked last night, Ron and I went outside for a few minutes, and I asked Ron, I says, I want to know the truth. Don't you have any guns? You got to be like your dad. And he says, I have a few guns. I says, good. I had to get rid of mine because the laws changed up in Canada, and they told us to get rid of our guns. Otherwise, I'd still have mine. So I even got rid of my 22 automatic 22. You just pump it and shoot. And I used to love it for killing gophers and stuff.
You got rid of it, huh?
I got rid of it, and that shook me up when I got rid of my gun, air pistol, air 22.
Tell me about tell me about your mother a little bit. We haven't talked about her too much. Tell me about what kind of a mother was she?
Mother was always kind, generous, considerate. When I was growing up, when I was very little, I had club feet. I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk until I was at least 10. I always walked on the side of my feet. I can remember Mother coming home from being at the hospital all day. She'd bring me home and rub my feet with many different things, and it would take hours out of her busy schedule that she had. Ardell was still home. Donna was still around. And she'd work on my feet night and morning. We went back to the doctor's in Edmonton, and the doctor told her that I would never walk. And that just shook her up. And she says, he will walk, and he will walk again. And Mother never gave up on me. She'd have Donna rub my feet. Donna was always taking care of me, doing things for me, pushing me in the buggy when I couldn't walk because I had stitches in the back of my feet. And Mother says he will walk again. They had U.B. Brown come from Salt Lake City, give me many blessings that I could walk again. It wasn't till later on in life that I'd start little by little walking on the bottom of my feet till I could walk, and then I got walkers and walked around the furniture so I could walk. And Mother would always pray every night that I would have the patience and the willpower to walk, and this was the kind of mother she was. Dad would always stand by her. Dad was always, well, if it has to be done, it has to be done. And he says, we don't have a lot of money at the time, but this is the way it's going to be. This is the way it's going to be. I was slow on getting my education because of my feet. I was backwards in school. Kids used to tease the heck out of me, and I used to go home and cry many times. Mother used to say, look, words can't hurt you. Just keep on slugging away. And Dad used to say, is there any special thing you'd like on the farm to help you along? I said, yes, I would like a lamb that I could have for my very own. I raised this lamb. Dad says, we got to cut off his tail. I says, no, the tail's going to be left. The lamb used to drag it on the ground and get burrs in it and everything in the tail, and I used to comb it out. I had something that I could believe in. I taught this lamb to come to school, to pick me up, to take me home. I taught this lamb to open gates. I taught this lamb to carry an egg in its mouth. I'd have to gather the eggs, and this lamb would carry an egg every once in a while. He'd chew on an egg. Dad would say, well, I guess that's all right, but they were always kind and considerate. And I think that's why you can see that in Lowell. You can see bits of it in Ardell. And he was always there for other people. And he used to tell Lowell many times, it's not what you have in life, it's how you use it. And I think this is a lesson for all of us. So it's a little bit about Mother's life.
That story. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And now to this day, when the weather changes or gets cold or too much cold on my feet, I can feel it. It just penetrates my feet, something fierce. But I've always been able to walk, and I've always been grateful for that. And you, Uncle Hugh, used to say, hold your head up high and go through life. And
that's neat. You had those experiences, you know. Your mom spent all those hours and hours, and
she had to spend an hour and a half both night and morning out of her busy schedule. And Jay was busy because she did a lot of things for different people. Mom and Dad had the size of this room, the kitchen, everything, of garden. And Dad used to plant the garden. Mother used to go out and pick the garden, clean the vegetables, put them away. Dad used to have at least 15 sacks that I can remember of potatoes that he used to keep in his root cellar. And that was work, plus his farming, his other things. I always wanted to work with Dad, but later on in life I found I couldn't. I went away. I asked Dad if I could go to school, and he says, no, you can't just yet. You got to stay home. So my brother-in-law come down from Edmonton. I asked him if I could go back and work with him. Dad says, absolutely not. You're not working for a crook. You're not working for a person that cheats and lies and steals. So after a while I says, okay. And then I found out I couldn't work with Dad anymore, and I left. Dad phoned me up about 4 months later, and he says, son, I think you should come home. I haven't been home for a while, so I jumped in the truck and went home. Dad says, I walked in the house, and he says, I think it's about time you went on a mission. I says, no, I'm not ready to go on a mission yet. He says, yes, you are. You're going on a mission. He says, you go talk to the bishop. The bishop was Chase Smith. I knew Chase Smith. I went over that night, made an appointment with Chase Smith, and I walked in there to the bishop's office, and I says, well, go ahead, tell me why I shouldn't go on a mission. Well, he says, you already know the answer to that. He says, I've told 5 guys not to go on a mission. You're going to be the 6th. He says, money is more important than a mission. Now, many guys will tell you that nowadays. And I went home all happy, all excited. And I says to my mom and dad, I says, that's over with. Now I can go back to work. Dad says, no. He says, you're going to put on your suit in the morning and come with me. So in the morning, I put on my suit. We went to Cardston, talked to the stake president. I went on a mission. 3 months, I had to get ready to go. And Uncle Hugh came down and he says, it may be a good experience for Mom and Dad to go over there and serve a year and do a little missionary work too. And he says, you can go over first. And I said, I'm not ready for this. I'm too busy making money. Let me do what the bishop told me to do. He says, no, you're ready to go on a mission. That's how come I went to Hawaii. And it was fun, a lot of good experiences, but a lot the same as anybody else has them. You find the good and bad in all of them. The first 3 months I served as a proselyting mission, and I worked with a lot of people. I worked with people that wouldn't come to church. The stake president came and asked me if I'd bring these people into church. I says, no problem. I've had lots of experience taking people to church. I had no problem. Well, it's the biggest eye-opener I got, because people wouldn't come to church no matter what. So I asked one of my companions why people won't come to church, and he says they're out on the beach. And I learned from there that people would not come to church because they were too busy out on the beach. Now I got to go to all the islands, which I was happy that I went. And it was a great experience, but I'm getting off the beach, so.
Oh, that's fine. That's great. It's all good. So when you were on your mission, after you were there about a year, then your mom and dad came?
Yeah.
Did you have much interaction with them on the mission?
A little bit. They wouldn't let me have a lot. I got to see them, I think about once a month. They shipped me from island to island, so I had to stay over there. I had to stay in the dorms with the other missionaries. I got to see them once in a while. But I remember this. I went to Dad and I says, I'm not going home. He says, why? I said, I'm staying here. I said, I want to stay here and retire here. I want to make this my home. And he says, no, you're coming home. I said, I got nothing at home. I says, you go home, sell my land, sell my truck, sell everything that is mine, and I'm staying here. And Mother says, you got a girlfriend? I says, no, I got 2 or 3 of them. And Dad would say, you're not marrying a Hawaiian. I says, well, I'll marry a Japanese, and I don't really care. I got 2 or 3 of them. And Dad would say, no, you're coming home. And I said, if I come home, can I come back in 6 months? He says, yeah, you can. Well, that was the biggest mistake of my life, except marrying the woman that I have. But I said, I had a hard time coming home from a mission. My old friends were there to meet me again. And coming home from a mission like Larry and I talked about today, make sure your son goes to school. Make sure your son keeps his morals high right up until the bitter end, because once you let your morals down to go out with your friends again, they'll just drag you down until you're in the dirt again. That was a lot of my problem. I stayed home. I met up with a lot of bad friends and went wild for a while. But a mission was the greatest experience of my life. I often give a talk in church, which I hate doing, and I always feel like it's more important to know what you should be doing as what you want to be doing. it's great to be a member of this church. And a mission helps you out so much. Just can't believe what it will do for you. Go ahead.
That'd be fun. Yeah, tell me about Uncle Hugh. What memories you have?
Just a great guy. I went over on my mission. Got tired of riding my bike. So I went out and bought a car. I wasn't allowed to buy a car, but I went out and bought one. I wasn't going to walk anymore. My feet was getting tired. He came over and he says, "You're supposed to ride a bike or walk. You're not supposed to have a car. I'll give you so many hours to get rid of this car." So, okay, sold the car. After he'd gone back, I buy another one. And then I get a visit from Elton Tanner. And you know Elton Tanner, he was a little scruffier than Elton, or Uncle Hugh. He was, when he said something, he meant it. And you better listen, or you're going to get your ears pinned back. I had my ears pinned back. I sold the second car and went back to a bike. But I remembered Uncle Hugh many times. He'd come and visit Mom and Dad in the summertime. And he was always there to see what we were doing and stuff. And Dad would say, "Okay, back the truck out of the garage and put Uncle Hugh's car in so nobody knows that Uncle Hugh was there." Well, I had a bad time for not telling people, and I'd run over to Vic and Art and say, "Uncle Hugh's here visiting us." "Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, sure they are. Uncle Hugh wouldn't come and see you guys." And I said, "Okay, fine. Don't matter to me." So I'd go home and I says, "Nobody believes me that Uncle Hugh's in." And Mom said, "Keep your mouth shut. We don't want the whole world to know Uncle Hugh is in town." But many times he'd come and help us do things and talk to us about different things. And you know Uncle Hugh, you met Uncle Hugh. He was always a great to be around. And that's the memories I got of Hugh. Watertown.
How he dressed when he was.
Oh,
Did he dress different?
one day he came in the summertime and he phoned Mom and Dad and he says, "I'm up in Waterton. Will you come up and see me?" And Dad say, "Yeah, we'll come up the next morning and see you." And we went up and Mother say, "Now you be nice to Uncle Hugh. You do this and you do that." And we couldn't find Uncle Hugh. We went in the rooms where he was, and he wasn't there. Walked downstairs. We used to sit there in one of the chairs reading the paper. He wasn't there, so I says, "Well, I'll find him. I know where he is." So I walked into the bar, into the lounge, rather, and there was Uncle Hugh reading the paper. And Mom just had a fit. "You can't be in the lounge reading the paper because we are Mormons. You can't do this." Well, he got up. He was in shorts. He was in a short-sleeved shirt. He was not dressed like Uncle Hugh usually dressed. He usually was in a suit and all dressed up. And Mother had a fit over this. Mom used to say, "Brother, you can't do this. You're up higher than this." And then when Eldon came and did the same thing, Mom kind of cooled off a little bit. But when it was holiday season, they were relaxed. They were doing whatever. And Uncle Hugh used to walk along the beach in Waterton and go on different. We'd go out for dinner with him, and it was just nice to be related to a little bit of the brass.
Yeah. Where did he stay in Waterton?
He stayed at the Prince of Wales, the big motel up on the hill.
That's what I was guessing.
Yeah. And Mother and I used to stay with him once in a while. Dad never hardly ever stayed. Dad had to get back to the farm. But Mom and I stayed many times in my life because I drove a lot. Dad would say, here's the car, fill it up with gas, pack your things, take Mother, go down to Salt Lake City and stay down there for a week or 2 weeks and then come home. This was always a thrill to me. I always liked to do this. This was home to me. I really liked to be around Uncle Hugh and Eldon and Uncle Hugh's sisters and brothers and stuff. It was just something that I enjoyed. I don't enjoy it anymore. Even on the freeways, it's too far to come. But I'm glad I came.
Yeah. That's good. Did you ever know Uncle Gerald? What I was named after?
A little bit, not too much. I knew Vic more than
Did you?
Victor
Wondered
Brown.
If you did, because I guess my dad liked him a lot. But
Yeah, your dad had a few favorites like we had.
yeah.
And he knew them a little bit better than I did.
Yeah.
I think I was maybe too young for him.
Yeah. Tell me
So-
again before I forget.
Okay.
We talked about it on the phone a couple weeks ago. I was asking you about how Grandpa acquired the land in Hartleyville and how he built the town there and how that all got started. Tell me what you know about that.
He started homesteading. He come up from Idaho, him and his brother, and he had land around different places that he thought he would homestead. And he didn't like the one place. It was called Larry brought it up a couple of times last night. I can't think of the name of it, but we bought land down there, and Dad didn't like the location. He went up a few miles where Hartleyville was, and he says this is the location that we're gonna homestead. And land was cheap at the time, and he'd get a quarter, and then he'd get another quarter, and then he'd add on to another quarter. Homesteaders would move in there and homestead around there.
Do you have any idea what a quarter section would have gone for back then? Any idea?
I haven't.
I'm just curious if you knew.
I haven't a clue.
So he started out with a quarter section?
He started out with, well, he may have started out with 100 acres, but he just kept building and building and building. And Chase Smith came to him one time and he says, I want a hunk of land. And Dad says, well, you can have this piece over here if you want it. Well, I want this piece. Dad said, no, if you want a piece of land, this is it. So Dad set B and Chase up, and then he set a few other people up. And as the boys got bigger and wanted to farm, Dad would say, here's a little bit of land here, a little bit of land there. Lowell got started with a little piece of land, and they went from time to time on just acquiring a little more and a little more. As time went on, Dad went to a lot of the Mormons and asked if they would be interested in putting up a store and a school and a church. And they says, no, we're too busy building our own foundation right now, our own buildings and stuff, and we can't give you the proper stuff that you need to start a store or a church or a school. And Dad went home pretty disgusted, pretty fed up, and he says to Mom, he says, I guess it'll never get started because I can't do it by myself. Mother says, let's pray about it, we'll figure something out. So I can remember this story very well, that Dad prayed about it for some time, and Mother says, I think it's important that you go to the non-members and ask them if they will help you. Dad went to the non-members, and they all responded like saying, when do you want to start? And Dad would say, well, give me a couple weeks and we'll get going on it. Well, how the couple weeks were going on, these non-members would get together and say, this is what we're doing to help Brother Hartley start this school and this church. It was small, but they would help. They came then in those 2 weeks and helped started the school and the church. The store came later, but they started it. And then it got to the deal that Dad went to him and said, I think we need to have a name for this town. And the non-members said, I think we need to name this town Hartleyville because you're the one that started it. And Chase Smith again was there. And he got up and he says, no, I don't think it should be named Hartleyville. It should be named Smithville or something like that. And he hadn't done anything to help or anything else. He just wanted his name on the post. And the non-member says, no, you get out of here and you stay out of here because it's going to be named Hartleyville. Well, he was mad over that for years. And it seems like whatever we did, we could not make him happy. And he was just a bear all the way through life. And it was important to Dad that he had the non-members come and help him. And he says, any time in your life that you need help and pray about it and can't get help from members, don't ever be afraid to go to the non-members because you'll always have help. And through my life, I found this out. I had gone to members and asked them for help doing different things. Nobody'd help me. So right away, I would just go to the non-members. I had a lot of non-members, friends that joined the church because of who we are, what we stood for. And a lot of them was because of Lowell, was because of Gilbert, because of our family, because the way we lived our life. And it was important. It was important to Dad to have this. And the other day, my sister sent me out Hartleyville, and it was a plaque that I still have. They took it off the fence when they left Hartleyville. And it was just great stories that we have along the way. We have a great heritage. We have something to be proud of. And Lowell, he dabbled into everything. He dabbled into cattle, pigs, anything he thought he could make a living at. He'd sell Rena-ware and go to people's places, throw out these pots and pans on the floor and try to get people to buy them. And he was just a regular salesman all the way down the line. And he'd try so many different things. But he always had that lovely personality that I find in you boys. You boys are this really great to me. I love you all
Thank you.
for the love that you have.
Toward you. It's great. Well, I'm wondering, let me see where we're on the tape.
Yeah, I know. My wife's giving me the eye, so I guess I better.
Well, let's tell this story and then we'll let you go.
He had lots of theaters. He had one in Raymond. He had two in Cardston. Had the old Fox Theater up on the hill. And he had the other one down on Main Street. He was about ready to buy another one in Pincher Creek when Waterton came up for bids on. He bid it on that one and got it. He had his father-in-law run that theater. The one in Pincher Creek come up for sale, and another one in Raymond he got the one in Raymond and let Pincher Creek go. But people used to tell him, you're a fool for having all these theaters. You'll never make anything work. You'll never make anything go of it. He had it all arranged where different people would run the theaters and clean them and take care of them. He was always, people would come up to him many times and say, I don't have enough money to get in. I don't have, and Lowell would always say, go ahead, go ahead. He was always kind-hearted for different people. He'd always bring good movies in. He'd ask the people what they'd want to watch, and he'd always bring good movies in. And through that, he got to know a lot of people, and he dealt with a lot of people. Many times he'd say, when I come to the show, if I came by myself, he'd say, go ahead, go on in. We work together. We have a card that has the Hartley brothers on it. We all worked together at one time, Lowell, Ardell, and I. That was fun for a while, till we started getting married, and then our wives started busting it up. But it was enjoyment to have the Three Musketeers work together. And it was just nice to know Lowell, to know what he's done for the family. You kids have so much to be thankful for, to just know the dad that you have.
Yeah, he was a good man. He always wanted us to have more than he had.
Yeah.
He always tried to lift us up and get us tried to get us to go out and, as you said, see the world, get educations, and
He said, get a good education and you can move anywhere you want in life. He told me once, he says, you better go back to school and get your education, because that's the most important thing that you could have. Well, I found out from my dad that work was the most important thing that I could have, because with the work, I could go anywhere. When I got these churches that I ran, 4 churches at one time, I found that work could take me about anywhere. I enjoyed the work, but I was also under a lot of stress when I was doing the churches. I did 4 at once. I was a manager at 4 of them, and I went from church to church, and I had a little bit of problems doing that. But I know that hard work will take you anywhere, and it will help you. I hope I've been some help to you tonight about this. I've stuck to the fact as good as I could. I like Lowell. I think the world of him. He's a good role model to follow. When I was watching you tonight down there in your sound room, I'd like to say this. Just to look at you reminded me of Lowell. To hear Ron sing, or Larry sing, just brought back a lot of memories. Because Lowell was always drumming that guitar and playing the drums. Somebody special. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. I'm so glad you
Thank you.
made time to do this for me, because it's important. It's
It's
important to me to
well,
get your stories and your perspective on things.
when you go out to Hartleyville once in a while, just go out there and look around.
It'd be fun.
It just really, the last, I guess 6 months that I went out there 6 months ago, it just stirred me up, because everything's gone. Hey, that's good.
Yeah, he knows his boss.
You got it.
Yeah.
And it was just heartbreaking to see everything gone.
Yeah,
The only thing that's standing is Lowell's old hog barn,
yeah.
and that just,
Sad to see what's become of the church.
Yeah.
A couple of big garage doors on it.
yeah, and they
Too bad.
and they built that. They took a one-room school and built it and built it and built it until it was a big school. And the same with the church, the same with the store.
Yeah.
They just kept building it and building it, and it's beautiful. It was just something to always remember.
Yeah.
And for Dad to have Lowell on one corner and his sister on the other,
Mm-hmm.
and then his daughter on the other, and Mardell was down a mile.
Yeah.
It was just, he had the family
Yeah.
around him.
Isn't that neat?
And Gilbert came and he wanted to move to Clara's home, and he just packed up and left.
Yeah.
But
It must have been a neat time there for a while when everyone was close. And,
it was a happy time.
yeah.
So anyway,
Oh, that's fun. Well, thank you so much.
any more questions, I'll be down again in 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. Well,